Nicholas Welch Crookston was the seventh son of Robert and Ann Crookston. He was Jess Crookston's uncle. Nick was elected sheriff of Cache County in 1885. During that time, there was some trouble between Marshall Adams and the city council. Marshall Adams resigned, and Nick was appointed to fill the unexpired term. In 1888, Nick was elected as city marshal, and also that same year, he won a second term for sheriff. His daughter Edna wrote,
"For years it was Nick Crookston's responsibility to wake up the city of Logan on the 4th of July. He set off dynamite in a gravel pit on Temple Hill above town, and I am sure the blasts were heard miles away. As might be expected, he also had to furnish the dynamite, and his source was in Richmond, about 15 miles away. I will never forget when he took me with him in a two-wheeled cart driving old Jimmy. I was required to ride backwards on the way home. He said, 'Watch out for anyone coming at us. If we get hit, we will be blown sky high.' You can believe me, I was so scared at the thought that I kept a constant lookout, and you can be assured that was the last time I went on such a ride." As sheriff, Father had to travel distances to track down a criminal, and at times had to stay overnight on the way back. One time their rooms were separate on a second floor, and although the prisoner was locked in, Father could not sleep, but woke up suddenly to see a rope made of sheets tied together hanging from the prisoner's window. He acted so fast he actually caught the man, who had not been able to get very far. Father started as Bishop of the Greenville Ward, later changed to North Logan, in 1891 with only 11 families and 50 people. Most of them were Danish, Swedish, German, and Swiss. One, a brother Wilhelm, was a musician and could play the organ quite well. Consequently, a great deal of time was well spent learning and singing hymns. As soon as my sister Lucille was old enough, she learned to play an organ my father had bought. I recall how much the older girls wanted a piano instead, but an organist was needed for the new ward to play under the direction of Brother Wilhelm. This Lucille did for many years while others were learning how, including myself.
Nick told of one of the most difficult parts of being sheriff was that the Tucker-Edmund bill was being enforced in Utah against the members of our church who had married more than one wife. It caused a great deal of sorrow and expense. I helped my people in every honorable way that I could, and I spent my own money too to help them in securing counsel, getting them witnesses, and getting them to and from court. The Deputy United States Marshal would bring my friends they had arrested to the jail for me to keep until they could get bail. After night came on, I would let them go home and come to jail early in the morning. This would cause me a great deal of worry and anxiety, but my confidence in them was never betrayed. Volumes could be written of the suffering of our people from the hands of the United States officials in the enforcement of that law, how they searched homes without authority and abused the families of the accused. I have seen in the penitentiary between 200 and 300 of our best men crowded in that place, a place that was not fit for cattle. Old men of 75 were in there. My mother's brother, John Welch, was taken there in his old age. He was convicted 3 times and fined and in prison. After going through all this, I tried to keep my standing in the church good. On a lighter note, Edna tells another story.
During the time Father was sheriff, from 1885 to 1891, he had a carpenter shop in the southwest corner of the basement of the courthouse. When he was not out on sheriff's duty, he used his shop and made caskets for the county cases. His younger brother and a number of his boyfriends often let down the window and went in to use Father's tools and to play, as it was usually warm and comfortable there. One time while they were there, they saw a big box sitting on some sawhorses. They lifted the lid, and to their horror, they saw the pieces of a man's body.
A not well-known story is told about Sheriff Nicholas Crookston and his son Robert Burns. The man from Benson Ward had been brought in repeatedly for drunkenness. Finally, the judge sentenced him to 30 days in the county jail. Sheriff Nick Crookston escorted him to the jail, and as he looked at the cell door and he looked at the man from under his beating brows. The brown eyes were serious and accusing. The judge didn't sentence you to 30 days, but your poor wife. She's the one who will have to do the chores and milk the cows. Towards evening, Nick came back to the jail. He unlocked the cell, and he said, "I want you to go home, do the chores tonight and in the morning, report back to the jail at 9 a.m. This procedure was repeated each evening until the 30 days were up. Many years later, Robert Burns went to Rexburg to take up a government farm. When spring came, there was a great scarcity of hay. Burns drove the 20 miles from Canyon Creek to Rexburg to see if he could find hay. He looked in vain until he saw a carload of hay on the railroad siding. Upon inquiring, he found the man who owned it, but he said that he couldn't possibly spare any. He had a big farm and many horses to feed. The man asked his name. Upon learning his name was Burns Crookston, he said, "In relation to Nick Crookston?" His son, Burns, replied, "Load up all the hay you need. Anything I can do for one of Nick Crookston's sons will help repay what he did for me." Then he related the story just told, concluding with, "I never touched another drop of liquor after the jail sentence. I moved up here, homesteaded a big farm. Today I'm a prosperous, active member in the church, and all because of Nick Crookston." Nicholas Crookston married Alice Melvina Rice in 1883. They had 4 daughters and 5 sons. Their youngest daughter, Edna, tells the following story.
I am Edna, the last remaining child of Alice and Nicholas Crookston. I look at a colored photograph of Mother taken from a painting of her dressed in her beautiful, well-fitting blue satin wedding dress, which was completely made by hand before her marriage. And years later, while she was living in Logan, Utah, raising a big family of children, she still looked beautiful. No wonder the famous artist who was living in her home for a time used Alice as his model in painting the murals on the walls of the newly completed Logan Temple. Her face adorned many of the figures which I saw while a child during my baptism at 8 years of age. One specifically outstanding was Alice holding a baby in her upraised arms, with her beautiful, gentle face smiling happily and lovingly. My only regret is that when the temple was refinished years later, the murals were covered with plain walls. I hope there are photographs of them taken somewhere.